No matter what the setting for nursing practice or the age of the clients who are the target for nursing services, spiritual assessment is an activity which all nurses need to be able to engage in to more fully understand the client and provide more accurate care. In this program, the focus is on spiritual assessment. Why is this such an important part of the nurse's role?
If we look at what our role is as nurses generally, what our phenomena of concern is, so to speak, we look at the whole person, and the spiritual nature is part of the whole person. And I guess spiritual assessment is becoming even more crucial because people are seeing through the research and some of the anecdotal reports we're getting from people that there's a direct connection between the person's spiritual well-being and health outcomes. So in that sense, it's almost a nursing imperative to address spiritual assessment.
Spiritual assessment also provides a much-needed avenue to communicate more clearly with others who are involved with the care of the client. As well, spirituality can be overlooked as a potentially invaluable resource and strength for clients if not attended to. Spiritual assessment is an imperative which is supported by the nature of nursing, by codes of ethics in nursing, and by an emerging body of knowledge suggesting the importance of spirituality to people's well-being. It is helpful to focus for a minute on what spiritual assessment is.
Spiritual assessment is a way to understand the spirituality of the patient. And when I talk about spirituality in this sense, I look at the meaning-making process that the person goes through. Obviously, when they are ill or injured, some big change is happening in their life, and somehow they have to come to terms with that. And people do that in terms of their own life, but also what effect that has in their relationship with others, and if they believe in a higher power, what that means in that respect. So the spiritual assessment is to see how are they coping with this new situation, and how can spirituality be a resource to them in dealing with hospitalization, their illness, and their change in life.
When Rudy comments that spiritual assessment is the way to understand the spirituality of a patient, he raises an important issue. How spirituality is defined determines just what is being assessed. As well, from what I have read in the area of spirituality in nursing, and from my own nursing experience, nurses who have a clear, evident sense of their own spirituality are better able to assess and provide spiritual care.
The nurses play a really important role in connection with spiritual care, as do other people in the healthcare team, but we concentrate on the nurses in connection with being open to the area of spirituality, being able to ask some of the questions of patients and clients and residents around what's important in your life in connection with religion and spirituality, to work with some of the spiritual assessment tools that are now available, to again gather that information, and then to be sensitive to the person's needs. And it's important too that each individual and each individual nurse would have an understanding of their own spirituality and what's the importance of spirituality and religion, if religion is important to them in their own life, because it's often from our own stuff that we have a sensitivity to where other people are.
Although what we actually do assess is driven by our concept of spirituality, there are a number of common elements which are delineated in the literature. For example, religion and religious beliefs, the meaning people attribute to life or events, and the supports they have. There are many different models of spiritual assessment, each with its strengths and weaknesses. The model focused on in this program was developed by Ruth Stoll, a nurse educator. Her guide to spiritual assessment is widely used within and outside of the nursing profession. She groups key questions under 4 general areas: concept of God or deity, sources of hope and strength, religious practices, and relation between spiritual beliefs and health. It is a model which focuses on meaning and allows for assessment of the spirituality of persons who are not connected to any religion. It focuses on both beliefs and practice and is simple to use. While not all questions in Stoll's guide need to be asked of every client, each question can open a window for further exploration of the person's spirituality. Let's look now at how 3 different people respond to some of the questions in Stoll's guide.
I've been diagnosed with fibromyalgia, and fibromyalgia is a condition that's really misunderstood.
2 years ago, I was quite sick. I had a growth in the common bile duct called a villus adenoma. Most times they're cancerous, but in my case, it was discovered it was not cancerous, and I had to wait a week to determine that. In the process of after the operation, I got pancreatitis, and I was quite sick and in intensive care for a period of time.
I am HIV positive and I have a mental illness. I'm bipolar. I would go through periods of depression where I may not leave my house for a very long period of time or not do anything at all, where I would do a lot of things all at once and do things that were inappropriate, and I knew they were inappropriate but couldn't stop myself.
God is very important to me, and it's the Christian God that I worship, and he's very important to me. In fact, to the point where I go to church regularly, and it's certainly an integral part of my life is my church involvement.
Religion is not particularly important to me. I do believe in a God, I guess entity thing, but not in a structured way where I would, be interested in the Bible or anything like that. And I'm not always sure how that's important. It would change from time to time, and sometimes it's not important at all. But because of the HIV, I had encounters in the past with the more traditional religions, Catholicism and what may have you and stuff, that were very negative, and I didn't like that, simply because I was a woman with AIDS, and the assumptions about how that came about, because I certainly wasn't born with it, so I was guilty of something along the way, and that didn't sit well with me. And certainly to be reminded over and over and over again that I did something wrong, I don't need that. I know what I've done, and I'm okay with that.
If I didn't have the faith in God that I have, I would never have survived this, what I've been through. Never. I believe in goodness. I believe in that whatever you sow in this life, someday you'll reap. It may take longer. Sometimes you don't understand why, but what you sow, you definitely will reap. I can't really say that I can describe him as a being. I just feel it's goodness and spirituality, and it's in your own heart. And God is everywhere. God is the people you meet. God is how you respond to another person, how you I don't know. God is just, He's there, and when you know He's there, and when you have this feeling, it's a wonderful, wonderful feeling.
God, to me, is certainly very personal, and He has revealed Himself in the Lord Jesus Christ. He came to earth for a while, and that's so the Scripture, the Bible, talks very clearly about some of God's attributes, and so certainly He's very personal. He's caring. He's concerned about me.
I would describe the God that I that I feel exists as an entity that is probably very different than what Christianity would use. I don't believe in places like hell, and I don't believe that people are going to be punished for living their lives in a particular way. And I would believe, I guess, that people are here to live their lives and to experience that in whatever form that takes.
I don't fear God. I don't believe that God is somebody that you have to blame either. I mean, some people, when bad things happen, they just turn away and say, you know, if there's a God, why is this happening? Why is that happening? God can't change that. I mean, He can't change. The only thing that I see that what happens in the world happens for a reason. I mean, it's not for us to understand. It's His plan, and if we have the faith, someday, I believe everything turns out for the best. So we can't be angry. I mean, things happen, children die, you know, things just happen. But you don't understand, and I mean, and you just have the faith that someday you will understand it, and someday it'll be okay.
And I wouldn't believe that that our God is a stern God or a cruel one, and I would just think that people are here to live their lives and to learn from that, and that's the most important part of all, and we're supposed to do that. Prayer is helpful sometimes. When I have a prayer moment, it gives me a moment to reflect on what's happening around me and how I feel about that and what role I play in that. So it gives me a moment to clear my head, and often to calm down because I'm feisty and fiery, which sometimes isn't always good. And it offers me a moment to think about whether or not I should be kinder and gentler with other people and with myself. So it brings me back to a centered place where I don't have to be feisty and fiery in a very negative way.
Prayer is very helpful to me. Now, I don't have to get on my knees. I don't have to close my eyes sometimes to feel God's presence. And all I have to do is just talk to Him, and He's here, and He's there for me whenever I need some extra inner strength. It's incredible.
Prayer is certainly helpful and goes along with my belief in God. I pray regularly. I don't pray as much as I should, but in fact we have at our church, in our church community, I attend a regular prayer meeting early Friday morning, and we've been going on with that prayer meeting for many years, and I find it's quite satisfactory. We pray for local concerns in the church and for family and for government leaders and quite a broad spectrum of things, but I come away from that feeling quite good and satisfied with that experience.
I don't pray to any particular being in particular because I have no idea what that would be. I've never met that person or that being, so I don't know what name it would have.
Well, when I pray, I certainly feel that I commune with a personal God, and that He hears, and that He's intimately concerned with me.
It just gives you that inner strength to be able to face whatever you have to face in that day.
A lot of my prayers would not be formal during the day as I do my work and so on. I stop and pray or think about God and commune with Him.
These questions open up exploration of if and how God or a deity is important to the person. These three people acknowledge God, albeit not all of them see God in the same way. It is important to note whether God is perceived as a strength-giving resource or as someone or something which has a negative influence in the person's life. God as helper or God as judge. For people who do not believe in a God, a question dealing with prime values which guide their lives might be in order. What is the most important thing or person to them which gives their lives meaning and purpose? Obviously, these three people are responding only to the questions which appear on the screen. In an actual nurse-client interaction, each of these responses might be explored further as the nurse reflects expressed or unexpressed feelings, gives empathetic responses, asks more questions, and so on.
The most important person to me is me. And that doesn't make me self-centered, that doesn't make me selfish, but God has put me here. I'm a human being, I'm a creature unlike any other. You can't find another person in the world like me.
The most important person to me, it would be persons. My partner and a very close friend of mine and my family, some of my family anyway.
Well, certainly on a human level, my family is very, very important, but I would say even more important is my relationship with God. That's more important, really, although my wife of 34 years is certainly very important to me, as well as my family and my extended family. When I need help, I'm in a very fortunate position to have a large community support, and I certainly turn to God when I need help, but also friends, caring friends that I know I can trust their judgment, and I know that they will be an encouragement to me. I certainly gravitate to certain people to help me in situations that are stressful or worrisome.
For the help that I would seek, I would turn to a friend and my partner. They both do this thing where when you say something, they repeat it back or reflect it back at you. And then if my thoughts are disorganized, or if I'm particularly angry about something or misunderstanding a situation, then they bring me through a process where I become to understand something in a calmer, more rational way. But they don't give advice, though, unless I ask for it, and I really appreciate that. But they do help me try to see something more clear or in a broader way, or to narrow something down if it needs to be narrowed. And if there's something else that needs to come into place, then they may offer an idea about who else to seek or what else to do. But I would have to ask for that.
My mother and I were very close all my life. And any time that I needed guidance or, I'd always go to my mother, always. We were very, very close. And she was always very concerned about me. And I think now I understand why, because my mother had fibromyalgia too, even though she was never diagnosed. So after her death, it was almost like she knew when she died that I was okay. I was strong now. I could take care of myself. And that was the message she gave to me the last time I saw her alive.
The people help me by just being there for me. They don't necessarily give me a lot of advice, but they're there, and they love me, and they're just there for me.
Or I would look for people that had the expertise that I was looking for about a certain issue. I wouldn't just ask anybody, because not anybody would have the answers, so I would have to figure out what is it I need and who has that to give.
I've learned that there's not too many people you can really depend on. And it's naive sometimes to think that if you are helpful and considerate to other people, that other people are going to be the same way towards you.
The people around me for strength and hope, I'm inspired by every single person that I meet. And even if they don't like me, that's how you become a better person, is by the other people around you. My cats.
My source of strength and hope is the belief in life everlasting. And to know that we're all here on earth for a learning experience. And whether it's self-actualization I've reached, or if it's the 10th insight, I don't know. All I know is that whatever will be, and I'm prepared. I hope I have a long life. I'd love to live a long life. But if that's not God's will, that's fine too, because I'm not afraid of dying. Even though I feel that I can accomplish a lot here yet. So I don't want to die, but if that's God's will, that's fine too.
My source of strength is really God as revealed in the Lord Jesus Christ, and He is there with me, and by His Spirit He's there with me. He's my helper and comforter and so on, and That is my greatest source of strength and comfort and hope and just peace through him. There is that certainty that I feel of spending eternity with God, and so there is not that same intense fear with some of the situations that come your way in life.
Note that each of these questions is trying to determine if the person has sources of hope and strength, and how these are perceived as such by the client. All three mention family, friends, relationships, which traditionally are mutual and based on trust. Some responses beg further exploration. For example, when Judy mentions that she has been naive to believe that there are a lot of people she can depend on. As a nurse, I would be interested in exploring this statement further. What experiences have led her to make this conclusion? What impact has this realization had on her? And so on. Both Judy and Dawn mention their belief in God as a source of hope and strength. When clients put God in the conversation, so to speak, there is a logical progression to providing spiritual care where God is part of that care. All nurses may not feel comfortable with this because of their own belief system. In this case, referral might be the outcome of the statement. The third part of Stoll's guide deals with religious practices. For those people who are not connected to religion, the questions might be phrased to include spiritual practices.
The religious practices that are important to me would be going to church, and that, I mean, every Sunday, unless there's something really, really important that comes up, I will go to church. I look forward to that, spending time with other believers, and we have a fairly informal church community, and we have lots of time for fellowship with one another and so on, and the period of worship and prayer and Bible study, formal Bible study, and I find that that's very, very important in my weekly regime.
I don't belong to one church. I don't. I go to many. I've taken communion in many churches, amongst many people in different environments. In fact, I took Holy Communion 4 times over Christmas, and I get a lot of satisfaction out of doing that, and turning to strangers that I've never met and saying, peace be with you, and honestly meaning that, and hope that that peace will be radiated from me to them, honestly.
While I was sick, where I was so weak and could not rise from my bed on many, many days in a row, what I couldn't do was read, because I could not concentrate. Neither could I pray, and so there I certainly felt that the Christian community support that I had, they were praying in my place. So I could not do some of the things that I normally do, like read the Bible and pray. I just was my brain just would not allow me to do that. I was just too weak physically to do any of these things.
I can't think of anything off the top of my head, any particular thing that I would do. If there's something that I feel I need to do, I would do it, but I can't think of anything. So I guess not.
It's like my mother wrote a poem, I don't need a great cathedral with windows of stained glass. I find God here in my garden among the clover and the grass. You'll never be closer to God than you will be in a garden. Never.
We practiced certainly communion at our church, but I did not have these things at the hospital. I certainly felt I didn't need it. Some people might find it's very important, but I felt I didn't need it. There would have been the opportunity if I felt I needed such an event, such an activity. I read a fair amount, and what I found right after I was quite ill, I came across a delightful book called by J. Oswald Saunders, entitled Heaven Better by Far. Here's a gentleman who was a missionary most of his life, and at the end of his life wrote this book, the last book, in fact, when he was 91 years old, talking about heaven and how he was anticipating going there. And I found that was very, very edifying and a delightful book, written by somebody who had lived a life of service to God. And that book in particular was very inspirational.
I don't read the Bible. I find books on psychology, on living life, autobiographies of people that have had good and negative experiences. I've read many books on what psychiatrists have written. I just wrote one, The Will to Survive. I can't remember now the author's name, but it's a fabulous book. She goes into codependency and why why people do that.
I don't have any spiritual books or symbols that are important that I would use on a regular basis anyway.
For Trudy, religious practices, books, or symbols do not appear prominent in her life, although earlier she did mention prayer as a helpful practice. Further exploration of this practice might be in order. Don mentioned earlier that he enjoyed Bible study, but mentions here his love of reading. This is a valuable piece of information, as it hints that bibliotherapy might be appropriate intervention in his case. The same holds true for Judy. Don's comment on the regularity of his church attendance hints at the stabilizing nature this practice may have in his life. As Stoll points out, though, religious practices are not always helpful, as, for example, when prayer is misused as a form of magic to make everything better. Again, this points out the necessity of exploring further the client's initial response to a question. One final point in relation to the responses. Don's comment on the change in religious practices which occurred during his illness is an important one. He did not feel he needed to participate in the ritual of communion while in hospital. Someone else might, which would point to the need for the nurse to see that this practice would be continued while the person is hospitalized. Don's inability to read and pray points to specific interventions which are needed, either by the nurse or others. Do you see how careful assessment leads to specific interventions?
You can't blame God for things that happened to you. I mean, there's nobody got control over all that. And besides, then, there is a reason. I believe there was a reason for my suffering the way I did. It was a reason why I went through what I did.
My sickness, I think, proved that my faith was there when I needed it in the difficult situations. It certainly, I know some people believe that you should not be sick if you believe in God, because if your faith is strong enough, you don't need to be sick. But certainly the God that I worship allows sickness to come. There may seem to be a randomness about who gets sick, but certainly God allows that. And He's there for you during the difficult times of dealing with sickness. But He certainly does allow that, and He's there to comfort through the situation.
I don't think having an illness or being sick has affected my feelings towards what I would believe about a God. I think that I've always believed the things that I've believed or felt similar feelings to that. So it didn't really change. A lot of people that I know who are HIV positive, their feelings have changed, and I certainly can understand why. A friend of mine once said, God will have to understand, if there is a God, why I didn't believe. And I could certainly relate to that.
I don't fear. I've never had 1 minute that I've said, what's going to happen? Because do you know what's going to happen to you tomorrow? Nobody knows what's going to happen to them tomorrow. So why worry about it? I think about one day, and that is today.
I don't think I had much fear of the sickness, except that it might lead to some disability, which would be stressful on my family and on myself. So I think that that's my main fear of being sick, is becoming an invalid or having to be looked after by people on a continual basis.
I feel that the thing that would be particularly frightening is needing to be cared for eventually. How much control of that am I going to have? And I hope that when I control it, I'm not bossy and nasty to people about it. And I do not want to get dementia. Now that does terrify me. I should have said that before. The idea of dementia, like really, like, woo! I can't even talk about that one. That's too spooky for me.
I learned a lot from my sickness, I think. It was not all stressful. I know that my belief in God gave me that ongoing peace and tranquility. There were periods of discouragement where I saw no progress in my health, but it was a very meaningful experience for me, and I had such a caring community around me, including the staff, the nurses and the doctors, and the cleaning people in my rooms were very, very helpful, and so on. I found that the whole experience in hospital was a very positive one.
Because I've been inflicted with this disability, well, I can consider it as a disability and become negative and become mad with everybody in the world and say, why me, why me? Or I can look at it like this: if I can cope with it, and I'm very fortunate that I did have long-term disability, so really I'm financially secure. So if I can, with my limited energy and ability right now, spend my days, whatever, an hour or two, whatever I can, helping people understand this condition and helping others cope with it like I am doing, that's my purpose, and I'll be satisfied. I'm satisfied with that. I'm happy with that.
In these responses, the nurse can assess the meaning the person attributes to the illness or whatever has happened to the person. As Stoll says, we seek answers in the face of mystery. When people ask why, they are asking a question of meaning. Such verbalizations can alert the nurse to explore such concerns in more depth. This program has highlighted some important points about spiritual assessment. As nurses, we listen to people's stories, encouraging them to share parts of these stories that they feel comfortable sharing. In the process, we may be instrumental in helping them find the language to express themselves. Whether we assess the spiritual dimension in an interview format, whether we ask a question here or there in response to some tiny nonverbal cue from the client, perhaps while involved in some routine aspect of care, the main point is that we do it on an ongoing, continuous basis. Sometimes we do not even have to ask the questions, as clients will tell us up front the spiritual issues they are struggling with. If we do not attend to the spiritual dimension, spiritual needs the client may be grappling with may be missed. Needs such as the need for meaning, for love and relatedness, for forgiveness, for hope. Spiritual assessment is the key to identifying such needs and the gate to helping clients deal with them. Only then are we providing comprehensive, ethical nursing care.